You're listening to the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Friends Talking Nerdy. If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is your favorite misanthropic recluse, Tim Jousma, joining me with the person who discovered that you cannot ski in two different directions at once, the Reverend Tracy. How you doing?
I am recovering. Yes, I injured myself. It finally happened, which, I mean, by the way, you're going to, right? Like,
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people hear that you injure yourself doing a sport and they're like, oh my God, so you're done now, right? And I'm like, no, it seems actually quite unrealistic to expect to never take a bad fall skiing. Right? Like it's just an inherently, contact type of sport. Like it's not people to people contact, and maybe that's just because I was a Taekwondo kid and you totally got injured during Taekwondo. I know I did a few times. Like one actually is the permanent injury I have with my neck. But you just kind of realize that you get your body to recovering and then you go back and do it. And that's just me. I like challenging my animal brain. I do honestly have like a little side theory that I think it helps me deal with like my anxiety and issues with like PTSD, CPTSD, because it's like, it shows me that I can fight animal brain and win. In an example where many people fight animal brain and win and have fun doing it, right? It's not like nobody skis. But it proves that I can do it. And that sometimes has really great payout. So that's why I kind of, I do rock climbing and there's all these bumps and bruises and shit like that. And it's funny because my partner and I have a quote at home that's, you don't bruise easy. You just have an active lifestyle. Because it's always like, I feel like I've got some bruises and stuff, which is, great and awkward sometimes because people just look at you funny. If you've got bruises, like there's something wrong with you, like you need help, like blink twice like, no, that's not it. I just do stuff. Like, here's pictures of me climbing rocks. Here's
evidence.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I take photos. It's like evidence that I'm not being like any harm sustained. I promise I did to myself.
I didn't walk into a door.
I did not. Oh God, that's so funny. That actually happened. Like okay. I was working at the tech company and I had just taken up archery. Now, anybody that's ever taken up archery knows that you could totally slap your arm with the string, especially if you hyperextend in your elbow, which I do. Like I can totally like bend that and it almost like cricks back a little bit. So obviously you could see where that would get in the way, right?
Yeah.
Well, the string totally did it and it actually got stuck like between the bracer, which I was ironically wearing, so I didn't get the string slap. And it got jammed and it bruised really bad. Okay.
Ow.
So I'm sitting in a meeting with my boss and he like just keeps looking at my arm and looking at me and looking at my arm. And he had said something like, he alluded that I could go to HR. I don't remember how he said it or what he said, but he let me know that there's like facilities, and I got so flustered and it hit me like, oh my gosh, this person thinks I'm in an abusive situation. And the real words that came out of my mouth was like, oh, no. It's not like I like fell down the stairs or anything, like, like throwing quotes up and everything. And it's so funny because I still unpacked the fact that was my response to like somebody who's concerned and me wanting to just desperately let them know that I was safe. But anywho, that all being said, yes, I hurt myself. Basically, I am one of those humans that I think when I pick up a new like hobby that I should have a matrix port and just be able to do everything. Yeah. And this was one of those humbling lessons of no, like I'm not quite like tearing it up level yet. And not necessarily that I was doing that on purpose. I just wasn't being as careful as I should have, knowing that, we had a little bit of ice like under the snow. So there were factors. I kind of dislocated my hip a little bit. It's okay because it popped back in immediately. again, these are things that aren't off-putting when you kind of had a history of doing like sports
Mhm.
or even the farm, like you dislocate and do stuff like that. That was actually where I first learned, like, as long as you can get it back in socket quickly, you're probably okay. And like, yeah, if you ever stand up and you've taken a bad fall and you like can't move your arm or something, that's kind of a sign that you may have dislocated it. And sometimes it's just as easy as like, doing a little stretch. You could pop it right back in before any swelling happens and you're right as rain. You'll be sore a few days after. But that being said, I really hope I get to go skiing again this weekend, because if I'm well enough, I'm going to.
Yeah, and it makes no sense to have people ask, are you going to do it again? Because I mean, the professor, like I mentioned, has taken up that hobby as well, and it is expensive. I mean, like at least a couple $100 at minimum to start, and I'm not going to spend that type of money on something to give up after the first boo boo. That makes no sense.
Oh, right. Because like right now, so a little side conversation about skiing, I guess, that we'll nerd out about is, this is actually the time of year where you can get some good deals, but it really goes from, I mean, your best deals you can maybe get really set up with some basic type of getting you skiing, and, also just being realistic, that's your first set of skis, right? Like maybe a couple of hundred. And maybe more like 500 per person for like really good skis. Whereas if it's at the beginning of the season, it's like easily $1,000 to get a good set of like backcountry skis to do all of the things, because we've been pricing this out for a while and we basically just decided to like trade some other long-term goals we were saving for, because we liked it. We kept renting. Like there's ways to try something before you like just jump in and buy everything. Like, my God, like even rock climbing gyms, you can rent shoes just like bowling. You rent shoes, you can rent gear like that. A lot of the places, actually, we rented gear there at Mount Hood when I was there for winter break and we took the kids cross country skiing. Like they're not going to have like the blade, like the metal edges so that you can like really get up ice or like do effective braking. But that's because they're really made to go on mostly groomed trails, which by the way, those are wicked fun. And if you can rent and do that and get out of your animal brain and get in the right position, it's a lot of fun to like get in the tracks and go really fast.
The East Coast is already bleeding into your language. It's wicked fun.
Oh, yes. No, I am so fucking aware of it. It's sad because more people have been at the office lately. I've been around humans more, and it's real. They say wicked a lot. And we do that. Like humans do that, by the way. I'm not trying to be a faker. You do pick up kind of the mannerisms and the language around you. If you don't, you like legit might be kind of a sociopath. Just going to throw that one out there. We want to be tribal and fit in with our tribes. So, and they're so sweet about it. They've kind of noticed it too, but I still throw out a y'all. Like, I don't think I'll ever stop saying y'all. I'm just going to be a random like amalgam of like little folksy sayings from all of the states I've lived in, except for Arizona. It's already kind of a melting pot of whatever.
In so many ways, yes. Me this week, I've been trying to find the right type of face that I need to convince the professor to allow us to get a cat.
Oh, we should talk that one out, because that's something I did wish people thought more about. Like, granted, you've had cats before, so you already know like the responsibility and stuff like that. But there's a lot of people that get them and just kind of expect them to exist for their convenience, and that's not really how that relationship works. But so you're ready. You're ready for another cat in your life.
I definitely am. Yeah. Keyword I. The professor, not so much. I mean, I more than likely, a couple weeks from now, we're probably going to start an episode with me gushing over my new cat. Let's be honest here. But when I had my cat Phil, I had so much happiness that he brought, just that is just missing when an animal is not there. And it would be cool to, be able to have that again. I mean, I'm doting over crows, for God's sake. I want to dote over something I can actually have some fun with.
Yeah. And there's a lot with cats that's just great for you. Like, especially if you do like struggle with anxiety or depression, things like that. The purring, for example, actually can reduce anxiety and stress. That's why beans is my ESA. And even the Mr. Reverend will attest that if I'm having a bad day, Beans wants to be on my chest because she knows she's going to lay there, she's going to purr, and that's going to help me. Which is sucky when, you are injured and that's why you feel bad. And the dumb cat keeps tripping you because they want you to go lay down and they think you need all of the attention. And I'm trying to say, no, this is different. Feel bad. This is a different one.
I know what to do.
No, she's actually probably still right. And I should be resting. But it still makes her be get out. You're going to make me hurt myself more. But yeah, there's a lot of really great things about cats. And I thought I had read at some point that they developed that purr actually as a communication device with humans. That's not something they technically, I think they did in the wild. So I'd want to recheck that, but I was pretty sure that was one of those, here's this cute article about cats. Did you know of nose?
Well, I know meowing is more they do that more for humans than they do, for other cats. The other cats is more like grunts I thought they, naturally did purring as well. But, I've just been really, really missing having a cat. And, I hope to be able to get the right type of face that it will take that will melt her heart to be yes, we can have a cat. So that's my goal.
Well, I hope you guys come to a decision that works for your household, because that's really what it comes down to. It's there's people that I know that want to adopt, animal after animal, dog after dog, or cat after cat. It really doesn't matter. And then it's at the same time, it's but weren't you just talking about that you were struggling to pay your electric bill? No, don't be that person.
Yeah. And I think for any time anybody considers adopting a pet, that should definitely be something you take into account. If you don't have any consistent money coming in, you don't have a roof over your head, maybe you don't, have the facilities to take care of a pet, Yeah. So anyway, we're here. Let's talk about marijuana some more. How about that?
Yeah, we were ready to continue on with our kind of breakthrough or breakdown of this article that, we had found that we kind of liked that it did the pros and cons, because it's something that we both have feelings and thoughts about. There's a lot of feelings and thoughts about it. So why not have a conversation about it right here on the show?
Indeed. The article that we're talking about is on procon.org. And, as we mentioned last week, the good thing about this article is that it does give you researched bullet points for each point, so for the for the next one, for instance, they're talking about black markets. And I think the evidence, if you make something legal, people won't have to go to illegal sources to buy that anymore. That just kind of makes sense. What about you?
It's a mixed bag, because cartel's gonna cartel, and by that I mean look at what they did to fucking avocados, guys. They're going to find something. So to me, the black market, the drug cartels, the war on drug stuff, the pros and the cons, to me, these kind of equaled each other out, which they do. If you look into the con side of it, law enforcement actually says that legal marijuana has enhanced opportunities for the black market, because the cartels can easily undercut the state license, weed. So they could still kind of keep it cheaper. There's still a market for it because some of the stuff makes it more expensive. But again, avocados, we didn't make those illegal. So using but think of the children, which is kind of one of those, anti-drug, that narrative. This one just doesn't sit with me either way. I actually don't really agree with it being a pro or a con. It just seems like it is, because they're going to find something. If it suits them to figure out how to steal places that make yarn and undercut it and sell it for cheap, they're going to do that. Cartel's going to cartel. And so, to me, it made total sense that these pros and cons 100% canceled each other out, because the cartel is its very own factor.
Well, let's take into account the usage of drugs, though, that's being implied here by the con, and it does not make sense that somehow the black market for weed, a product that in some states is legal and you can just walk into a store for, is somehow going to be more prevalent. I mean, how does that make sense?
Well, there was a Vice article that they referenced on here, and they interviewed a drug dealer, and they had just kind of point blank said, right now, with the way the tax structure is in Washington specifically, the black market's going to thrive. So it just kind of oddly opens it up, because if they can undercut it and sell it cheaper, that's what they're going to do. So they just don't really see it as being anything, like they're not worried about it. Because if anything, they're going to have a market either way, I guess, is really where I took this pro/con.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, it wasn't really an argument about whether or not you should or shouldn't legalize it. It's just more saying the cartel's going to find a way to benefit, like either way this goes.
It just, I don't know. I guess I can see maybe some really, really cheap people in a state like Washington or Oregon that would still go to an illegal source just because it may be cheaper. I mean, I'm cheap enough. I guess maybe I would do it if the circumstances were right. But on the flip side, that is still illegal. And, I would think a majority of people would much rather go to an official approved place, pay a little more, and not have to worry about, any sort of other consequences that come along with that.
People who can, of course, but does that statement not come from a little bit of a place of privilege? Because I'm still going to preface, I don't think admitting when we come from privilege is bad. Mm-hmm. But that's, again, assuming people can afford that little bit more. There's a lot of people who use this for things like anxiety, such like that, or even just use it because it's their version of having a beer instead of having a, you know what I mean? Like, people have their wind downs that seem so acceptable most of the time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and it's not the same as like your wind down being heroin or meth, right? So when it comes to something like this, if your cheapest thing is still getting it from the Domino's guy that gets it from God knows where, that's where you're going to go. So a lot of those chains won't change. If they've been delivering a reliable product and it's going to be cheaper than people who are getting it legally. And this is just my logical brain. I haven't gone and looked at anything. I'm just trying to figure out this problem that you're having is like, well, how does it help? Right. Yeah. So hear me out. If they already have these supply chains where I'm saying like, hey, Tim, I know they just legalized marijuana in whatever the fuck whatever state we're having this imaginary conversation in. Right. Mm-hmm. But wow, you're paying like that much for an ounce. Well, I've been getting it from my boy for like a third, like, you know what I mean? A quarter or a third of that price. Well, it's legal now. So aren't you more likely to maybe feel comfortable coming through me to get a product that maybe we've been using together through my source? Well,
you remember how cautious I am. I probably would not do that. The average person,
most people. But I also did preface that if we've been doing it, right? Like, so this is something that maybe I had been doing, and people, I mean, you've been listening to the same kind of stuff that I have about how our brain works and trust. Like, you are just more likely to probably trust something if your friend that you trust trusts that thing. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's where I could just see people still kind of like giving themselves like buying drugs like from somebody like that is bad. But then you give yourself that exception because, it's legal here. Yeah. And Steve is fine. Like, he comes in with his backpack, and he's got like a display, and I don't have to go anywhere. So it was kind of like, even before like delivery, they were doing delivery. So I guess I could see it. Like, again, it goes to I don't know if they would actually benefit. I just think they would still thrive, which is some of the wording on even the article that quote from Vice was pulled from, or some of the studies that they referenced in that little bit of the pro-con article. That's from LA Times. It was back in 2017, and it was called "High Taxes on Legal Pot in California Could Mean Black Market Will thrive. So there is kind of a difference from saying like, oh my gosh, you're going to fund everything bad they do. It's like, no, it just seems like they might still be able to thrive no matter what we decide on this topic. So I don't know. I'm kind of glad we talked about it because I feel like that was a better way of saying what I was trying to say at the beginning of pro number 5.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I totally get that. I guess ultimately my point was just the numbers are going on the numbers for black market marijuana sales have to be smaller in states where it is legal. For people that do buy drugs, and look at Oregon now. I mean, in Oregon, they've decriminalized small amounts of drugs like heroin, like ecstasy and stuff like that. So it's possible to, still buy that stuff on the black market and not have that. But I don't know. I just see people being a little more cautious now, I guess, because they can buy it legally. So
I think it's funny that you put that much faith in people that will line around the block for the McRib.
True. Yeah. Too much
I'm sorry. I really love the McRib jig. I can't help it. Because I think even with the vaccine stuff, like people are all like, what's in this? And it's like, but yeah, you couldn't tell me what's in the McRib, honestly, could you?
Did you watch the new South Park movie on Paramount Plus?
No, I haven't seen South Park in forever.
Okay, the movie is it deals with the kids as adults, and it deals with the COVID vaccine. And then there's a scene where Wendy, as an adult, is trying to get Clyde to take the vaccine, but she tries to trick him into doing it by trying to pretend that the vaccine is like cocaine, and he's all into it. But then he's like, "Wait a minute. Is this the vaccine? I don't want this shit in my body." But he was okay to snort some coke. But
yeah. But anywho, I guess
we'll move on to the next one here.
Pro and con number 6. So the pro is phrased as such: the enforcement of marijuana prohibition is racist because people of color are disproportionately impacted. So that, to me, definitely is a pro. I can't help but wholeheartedly agree that I am totally okay with looking at how we enforce stuff, especially when it does impact, any minority, because that's normally like a symptom of something else being the problem, not necessarily that one item, which in this case is marijuana.
Yeah.
But,
and there will be critics out there that will, say, well, if the people do this, then they deserve to go into prison and all that stuff. But when it comes to minority communities in this country, like if you were going to argue that the system is not racist, what you are ultimately saying is that minorities are somehow bad people. That they are somehow inclined to do this negative stuff, and that is not true. The statistics, if you do the research, clearly show that there is an over. I don't know the right word, but the police monitor minorities about drug use much more than they do white people. That is just a fact.
Yeah. And that's, that's more of an issue with, our legal system and how it works. And, how it can be, it's very much, it's a job where they try to teach you to decide if somebody's dangerous by look. And I think that's part of where a lot of these wires get crossed, because I don't know if enough people are at least trained to check biases like that. And those are the things they should be trained to check against, but they don't. Instead, they're tested for their range skills and how they act in situations that are, with a range setup or whatever, but not anything like mentally that helps flex those muscles. So, yeah.
Well, let's not even look at that, because all the cops are doing are just, enforcing the laws that are put into place. Let's talk about the politicians that are, putting in these ridiculous laws that ultimately steer law enforcement to do these things. Just the drug laws in this country are a joke. They just are. Other countries have, handle drugs much differently, like the Netherlands, for instance. There is still drug use. There are still people that need treatment and whatnot. But when you have it properly regulated, more people are going to be safer in the long run. And that kind of goes into the con here of the argument that legalizing marijuana leads to marijuana-related medical emergencies. Like, sure, you make something more widely available that is an intoxicant. I'm sure there would be a quick uptick in injuries at some point. But again, we're also talking about marijuana. We're not, it's, when you're on weed, you're mellow, you're chilling, don't want to really do much. If you're drunk, then that's a different story. It's a different type of deal. So I maybe, again, I can see where maybe with it being legalized and more widely available, that statistically the number would just go up no matter what.
That's basically what you're running into, Tim. It's like basically anytime you make a change, there is probably going to be like some kind of effect like that. Like, I kind of bet that when the pogo stick was invented, there were more emergencies related to the pogo stick in the areas where it was sold. Mm-hmm. And it just goes to that, where like some of this information to me doesn't seem relevant to the argument because, for example, even looking at the pro side of this, is it a problem with it being illegal, or is it just another way that this is showing that there's a problem with our quote unquote legal or justice system, right? Like, is that pro actually a pro for legalizing marijuana, or is that still getting away from what is actually a different issue, which is there is like some racism in our law enforcement? Like, we've talked a lot about that over these last few years. And I mean, with George Floyd and everything like that, right? Like, come on, we know that this is a problem. George Floyd, last I checked, had nothing to do with marijuana. So I just don't want some of the pros, like where it is something I support, right? Like, please don't ever hear me or try to or take it that I'm saying that I don't support ideas that would result in minorities being arrested less. So yes, if legalizing it, if that's another pro to it, but to me, it wouldn't be like the pro, because that's still going to scapegoat that same problem under different scenarios, like the ones that did lead to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Am I saying her last is Breonna Taylor?
I believe so, yeah.
I think so. Sorry, I'm just naturally shitty with names. I forget my own sometimes, I swear to God. But yeah, so I just have a hard time because I try to think about it of, does this actually address this one topic? Or is this possibly like more about another topic? So that pro I felt was more about kind of almost deterring from another topic, which is the racism in our law enforcement issue that we're trying to figure out how to talk about so that we can address it. And then this one, the con about it causing more accidents, I'm like, well, all right, well, them motor vehicles that Ford invented, hoo-wee, there's accidents everywhere. We should make motorized vehicles illegal. Pogo sticks, any new fireworks? Oh, there we go. Yeah, we should definitely ban fireworks, because everywhere fireworks are sold, in the month they're sold, accidents go up on fireworks. So I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like the stuff they use for the arguments just aren't super persuasive to me. So it's like, oh, okay, so you're saying if you made a change here, there would be effects. So of course I would expect there to be effects. And to me, that's also speaking to why we should be able to have conversations about, how to drink responsibly, right?
Yes.
How to do things responsibly, and maybe find ways to have those conversations instead of just blaming it on the legal status of something.
Yeah, because it is one thing to make it legal, but just making it legal and then not having the backup of, teaching people, I guess, the ideas of, moderation, of using stuff correctly and whatnot. It's like bringing that up in America, I guess, like why at this point, because I don't think that would ever happen, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of that war on drug effect, though, I think, right? Because we want to sit there and say that there is like a prescriptive, like hard, make everything illegal, dare against drugs and all of that. And the opposite of that is everything legal. And it just is going to go to that middle path mentality that I try to like put on most things, that I just think it's a mix between the two, that, you know, you can actually allow some use, but maybe there does need to be some form of an education about it, but maybe making everything illegal isn't necessarily the answer. Sure, make some of the consequences illegal, right? And we
Oh,
already
yeah.
do that. We figured it out for alcohol. So
Yeah, and like, do I want, a pilot on a plane that I'm a passenger on, smoking some weed before they fly? No, I don't. So if that pilot does do that, I want the book thrown at him. This is not about having the Wild West here in terms of legalizing these substances. This is about recognizing that adult humans can choose to take a substance that may leave them incapacitated for a certain amount of time, and that until proven otherwise, they should, have that trust to be able to do what they want. Sorry,
yeah.
because again, something like this, you're doing drugs in your own home, in the comfort of your own home. If you're fully employed, you're a contributing member of society, you're not breaking any laws, and you do drugs in your own home, how is that bothering anybody? It is not.
Yeah, I mean, that goes to, I think I've said it on this show before too, that right now, my current humble opinion on it is I don't necessarily think it should be illegal to do things, but I do understand making it illegal to sell things, right? Like, we do it with food. My gosh, there is this documentary on milk, and they will crack down on you like you are the fucking drug cartel if they find out that you're selling milk that's like not pasteurized. Like, there were people trying to sell, just as raw as you can get it milk, and
Yeah.
they'll really crack down on you for that because they have decided that it is dangerous. But I don't know, like, I also still kind of currently think that, you said you don't want a pilot who would smoke and get on the plane, right? Like, and I get you. I don't want anybody who would use any pill, drink anything to an intoxicating level on purpose before they have to go do a job function, right? Clearly unhealthy. I don't want that. However, if they use marijuana for like anxiety, things like that, I totally understand needing to be medicated. And to me, that still goes back to, I can at least for sure say that this should be legalized medicinally speaking. And that goes into, because I think it does make it easier to put restrictions and be able to define overuse and abuse, right? Like right now, if you overuse like your Xanax and get into trouble, there is totally different paths and even, repercussions than there are for a DUI with just being drunk. Like, there's totally different levels of dealing with that. And I think I'd almost want it to be dealt with to the level of how they would deal with you if you were abusing a medication behind the wheel, just because that tends to be dealt with in a different way that's a little bit more, I would say, leaning you towards you'd almost have to be therapeutic about it because it's a medicine that you've abused, versus alcohol tends to be more viewed as well, you made a shitty decision with something and you should be punished. So, and I don't really agree with that either for alcohol. I personally almost I've got some mixed feelings on alcohol in general. I do very rarely still drink it from time to time and enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I do kind of lean towards, I do want a world where things are just more people's choice to do. But at the same time, how do you address kind of an overall pattern of unhealthy use of things? We've got kind of an unhealthy relationship with alcohol in America. I mean, come on, Campbell's Soup, is making alcoholic soup, guys. It's ridiculous.
Their soup is bad enough.
Hey, you know what? I used to really like their clam chowder until I actually moved to New England and went, oh, okay, got it. That was swill. Now I've had real New England clam chowder. I have been learnt. So, but anywho, so I guess this even goes into pro number 7. Where they said crime goes down when marijuana is legalized. So that kind of fits in interestingly with the one above it. It's kind of talking about medical marijuana dispensary decreased crime though? Like so it goes into part of it is talking about specifically medical marijuana. So we have to remember there are some states that are only medical. I almost wish that they mentioned that specifically, but in a way they kind of do in the article. But there's always links to go and see what they were talking about. But anywho, it just says studies show that medical marijuana dispensaries decreased crime in their neighborhoods because of an increased security presence and more people walking around the area. So I thought that was kind of cool. Again, it makes you kind of go to, I'm not sure that actually says, like, to me, that says, okay, so you need more beat cops, like, in your life, I guess. Like, I don't know if I like well, at least it's taken over what the beat cop used to do. Anyway, but they're also more personable because they're not, that strict, which, a beat cop used to not be so strict. And Portland, Oregon, I had actually seen them trying to, work on that relationship with people and them having them outside of events and stuff like that to, like, remind them that they're humans too. And every now and then I did run into one on the max that, like, would try to have conversations. So I feel like some places are getting that training. So police can be like more at that point. But to me, it's like, I don't know if I want the retired veteran who's guarding the marijuana dispensary to, like, have to do the job that I think the police should be working on figuring out how to do, like they kind of used to.
Well, I mean, I think too, part like this, kind of tackling back with the previous one as well is kind of misleading in a way too, because, like, crime going down, you're taking the purchasing of a product and no longer making it illegal. So of course, crime is going to go down. No. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they even, in the next little bit of it, they related some things, well, that I thought was cool. So I did want to share, like, this little chunk, like, straight out of here, but they kind of took a few things, and I like it when you take kind of a few bits of information and make it logically like a puzzle that comes together as to why it's a pro. But basically they just go into the research. People drink less and alcohol sales drop in places where marijuana is legalized. And so because the amount of crime and violence caused by alcohol use is something like 10 times higher than marijuana use, and alcohol is a factor in about 40% of violent crimes, like, you kind of can see, oh, okay, well, that's why crime would go down. Yeah. So they're actually able to look at stuff and kind of try to project, like, saying, hey, here logically, just saying, like, the marijuana, the crimes, especially crimes against other people and, like, violent crimes, aren't near as significant with marijuana users. And if people are drinking less in an area where this is legalized, then maybe that is actually a good argument. So that to me was better than the oddly mentioning at the start of the pro, that the pro was that, where there's these dispensaries and these people sitting outside, there's less crime in those neighborhoods.
Yeah. Oh, and also to keep in mind what they said about how shift from drinking to cannabis use decreases other crimes like domestic violence.
Yep. And assault. That's kind of, sorry, I guess I didn't finish reading into that one, but that's what I was saying is, like, especially crimes that seem to be violent and hurt other people, like, for sure. Like, we can't say the same about, getting behind the wheel. Right? Because we just read another one that says, well, that kind of goes up. And it's like, well, of course it would go up because you changed a factor. But it is interesting of, like, but I wonder, the other piece of now the other con argument is, but wait a second, do DUIs go down? So does the overall number go down? Are you just saying that it goes up when you legalize it with weed, but is the whole number going up, or just with weed? Because of course it would. With weed, you just added a new thing to the equation, but you have to look at the overall one. So I thought they did a really good job with this pro, kind of showing, like, yeah, there's, like, little things that don't look like they would matter, but here's how it kind of equals our argument for saying crime would go down, especially the really nasty shit that I think everybody is super pro for getting rid of, right? Because I don't think every couple that ends up in a domestically violent dispute, because, hey, by the way, that can happen where they are both fist fighting each other, and it has crossed a path where it's not a abuse situation, it is legitimately a fight. where they both were fueled with alcohol. That it used to be they'd go home and drink together to wind down. But then eventually, if you've got toxic shit in your relationship, drinking together isn't going to be your wind down anymore. It's going to
Yeah.
be your thing you fight drunkenly over. And then sometimes those things get out of hand. So yeah, if it decreases that, if it decreases even domestic abuse, because if people are more likely to maybe use marijuana as their self-medication over alcohol being their self-medication, maybe they are less likely to succumb to those violent tendencies that can happen when you self-medicate with alcohol.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm totally down for legalizing something if it's going to reduce domestic violence and abuse. I am super on board for that one. Now, I would be curious, again, it goes into, you'd have to kind of drill into the studies a little bit more. Did it matter about it being complete, like recreationally legalized or medically legalized? Because that kind of goes into my still little thing there. I would
Yeah.
assume it would have to be recreation though, right? Because if it's taking the place of alcohol, and alcohol is recreational. So
Yeah. Medicinal beer. No.
there's, well, because there's no, that's like, at least there's medicinal use for marijuana. I don't really know of any medicinal use for beer, but it just kind of goes into those things of like, sometimes I don't know about alcohol's existence.
Well, the con here for number 7, speaking of this, talks about how marijuana use, harms the brain, and legalization will increase mental problems. It's like, on the one hand, yeah, abuse of it can lead to problems. That cannot be not denied. Abuse of any drug will lead to other problems in your body. That is something that, personal responsibility is a thing for. That is also something that, making it, legalized, education should be a part of it. And yeah, it's like, you have to acknowledge this, but you also have to acknowledge that other things that we do find legal as well, like alcohol, psoriasis of the liver, anyone. I mean, there are health drawbacks to anything, really.
Yeah, there's health drawbacks to abusing things. And this also even goes into yes, this is where I still definitely support it, medicinally, because you're at least talking to a doctor about how to use it and how to not abuse it. But it does talk about, I thought it was interesting that the top of the con, like they use like marijuana use harms the brain and will increase. But then you actually get into like some of the summaries, and it's more of the verbiage that's correct. It may increase, and abuse can cause harm to the brain.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and yes, it can. It doesn't mean that it will, though. So that the con kind of put me off, like from the very top of the bold of it, because I was like, why do I feel like that's hyperbolic? Like you headlined me. But anyway, they did find Harvard and Northwestern found that recreational marijuana smokers showed abnormalities in the shape, volume, and density of certain areas of the brain. But that goes into, yeah, there are things that we are allowed to do that ruin our body. And it's interesting, right? Because I think that's almost the ultimate question I have is we're totally fine with the government stepping in how they do, like on milk, for example. Granted, there is a subset of people who are not okay with that, but the bulk majority of people are fine with it. We're also fine when the FDA, kind of stepped in for stuff like, I think I talked about the food that invented America. Like it kind of talked about how it was the fucking Wild West of markets. And there were people selling like rotted stuff. They were selling milk with laundry bluing detergent in it. They were selling stuff with sawdust. People were dying of stomach cancer. And that's really why the FDA had to be invented. But you say education. Well, education would have solved those things too. But we went rule route instead. So I guess it's just interesting to me that I'm curious at what point they're going to lay down rules, because we can't necessarily control how people are educated, but you can control whether or not something is legal or not. But yeah, so obviously overusing anything, abusing anything can cause so much damage. Watching TV constantly can actually change some of the shape, volume, and density of certain areas of your brain. So it just goes into at what point do we make rules, and at what point do we say it needs to be educated? And then if it's educated, it seems like we have a lot of education we need to get out to people. How do we do it?
Yeah, I mean that's easier said than done. I've all people realize that, because as we see in the news today too, when it comes to basic health stuff, most people are resistant because they heard about something else on a Facebook meme that somehow means more than the words of a medical professional. But
That's just where we're at, Tim.
yeah. Well, I think this is a good spot to wrap it up this week. How about you?
Oh, I do too. I think I'm kind of good with the marijuana talk. I think basically there's still a lot to know. And
Mhm.
it's not as cut and dry as like that we should just blanket legalize it. I almost wonder if we should like phase it. Like maybe federally, they can start with medical and see how that goes on that federal level. Because states even did that. Arizona did that as a way to get it there. And they've got a pretty thriving,
Oregon did it.
Yep, Oregon. Oregon went medical first, and that went really well for them. I can't remember if Colorado did because it just feels like they've had it forever. But it seems to go well as a tester, and that's one that I think I could easily support. Is federally, we could at least make it legal, like as a medication, and then maybe we can protect some people who do need to use it. And it'd be nice if health insurance covered it, so maybe that cheap cost factor would cut some of the cartel shit.
Well, I mean, I've made it clear where I stand on it. While I very much acknowledge that it is a drug, and as such, I think it is important that there be limits in place, society-wise, as to who can use it and to how much you can use it. Having said that, we're talking about the actions of adults here. Unless using that drug is going to cause that person to do something that is going to damage, not only them but other people. It's like we can't legislate good behavior in everybody. We just
exactly can't. And we can't, like, that's where it is. That's where I've got the rub with it, because yes, it does seem as simple as like, well, they need to educate themselves. And it's like, but it's not that simple, because you can't make people educate themselves. Like, this is literally how you deal with problems that affect society when people are not educating themselves. Granted, it goes back to, I think anything being fully illegal is kind of a mistake, because I don't think the war on drugs has been successful. But yeah, it's just kind of a rough one. I'd be curious to see how it goes, because I think federally, I could see it becoming medically legal. There's now so much of both sides of the conversation and both sides of the table that have now tried it and been open to it, and it's been a little bit more normalized, that I think we do stand a better chance than ever to get it at least federally on a medical point.
Former Republican House Speaker John Boehner is CEO of a medical marijuana company. If that is happening within 10 years, it will be legal in some way, shape, or form nationally in this country. It's just a matter of how do we go about doing that in a way that is right, in a way that, to your point, kind of phasing it into where people just, don't have where people aren't going in and buying like a hefty bag worth of weed and going out and, getting messed up or anything like that. But anyway, we'll wrap that up here. Keep in mind, folks, March 8th, we are excited to bring you the debut of the TNT Review.
Yes, we are going to kick this one off with F is for Family. This one is a season that has completed. It is out on Netflix. So if you'd like to binge it and maybe kind of experience it with us, we're in it now, just so you know. If you'd like to kind of go through the experience with us, I openly encourage binging this show. I've seen all of it. The Mr. Reverend and I have followed F is for Family for years. So I love getting to rewatch it, because for other followers out there, that the final season just came out somewhat recently. Granted, let's be real, we all watched it in a day and a half, but it is now out there for everybody to enjoy and consume in its entirety. I know a lot of people that wait until a series is done now before they get into it. So exciting times for those of you that have waited. I hope you're having fun working your way through.
Indeed. And I'm definitely excited as well. I've not seen the entire series, but what I have seen, I've definitely enjoyed. So we are going to be on a great little journey here.
Yes, because I can actually keep an eye for some of those cool callbacks that you don't know to look out for.
Yes, yeah, someone has to, right? But we'll wrap it up here then. So thank you all once again for tuning in to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. Each Saturday in this podcast space, we will have something to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
Have a good night, guys. If you're listening to this at night, I guess.
If it's the day, enjoy too. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.